On November 18th, 2025, a huge piece of the internet just disappeared. It wasn't some dramatic cyber attack, it wasn't an undersea cable getting cut. Nope. The cause was something way smaller and honestly, a lot more interesting. So let's dive in and dissect the massive Cloudflare outage that basically brought the digital world to a screeching halt. And really, that's the big question, isn't it? Because when a company like Cloudflare has a problem, it's not just one website. It's a massive domino effect that hits everything. Your social media feeds, your music streaming, your tools for work. I mean, even public transit can be affected. Okay, so let's set the scene. It's the morning of November 18th, and people all over the world start seeing error messages. At first, you might think, oh, maybe my internet is just being flaky. But it quickly became obvious this was something way bigger. This was a systemic failure. To really get the scale of the impact here, you have to understand just how big Cloudflare is. They're like part of the foundation of the internet itself, handling about a fifth of all web traffic. They provide the speed and security that millions of websites rely on. So when that foundation cracks, everything built on top of it starts to shake. And shake they did. I mean, just look at this list. The variety of services that went down was just staggering. We're talking social media, AI tools, music, huge online stores, massive games. It was a pretty stark reminder of how much of our digital lives depend on just a few absolutely critical companies. And this was the message so many of us saw. It wasn't a 404 page not found or some other generic error. Nope. The error page itself pointed the finger right at the source, Cloudflare. For us, it was confusing, but for the engineers inside Cloudflare, well, this was the start of an incredibly high-stakes, frantic investigation. All right, so you're in the Cloudflare virtual war room. A fifth of the internet is offline. The first and most important question is a heavy one. Are we under attack? And believe it or not, the first clues they found were really misleading. This became the #1 theory. And you can see why. Cloudflare's whole deal is defending websites from some of the biggest cyber attacks in history. So when things go wrong on this scale, it's pretty logical to assume the worst, that someone is actively trying to take you down. This quote from the company's own report puts you right in the middle of that tension. The Arsero attacks were a known, very serious threat. The whole team was primed to look for an outside enemy. And for a little while, it really looked like they'd found one. Two major clues sent the whole investigation barreling down the wrong track. First, the errors were weird. Services would break, then come back online, then break again, almost like clockwork. That doesn't feel like a typical software bug. Then, and you can't make this up, in an unbelievable stroke of bad luck, Cloudflare's own status page went down for a completely unrelated reason. To the team in the trenches, it looked like an attacker was trying to create chaos by taking out their ability to communicate. But it wasn't an attack. After hours of chasing these ghosts, the engineers finally found the real culprit. And it turned out, the entire global catastrophe was triggered by one tiny internal change that set off an unbelievable chain reaction. It was a perfect, terrible domino effect. It all started with a totally routine database permission change. That tiny tweak caused a query to start spitting out duplicate data by mistake. That duplicate data caused a critical configuration file to suddenly double in size. The software trying to load this unexpectedly huge file ran out of memory. And finally, that memory error made a core service crash, which is what caused the errors all of us saw. And here's the smoking gun. This configuration file, which normally had about 60 different parameters, suddenly ballooned to over 200. It just blew right past a hard-coded memory limit in the software, a limit that was put there for safety, but that no one ever dreamed would actually be hit. And here it is, the single line of code at the very heart of the outage. Now, without getting too technical, this little command, unwrap, is basically a programmer saying, I am 100% positive this will work. But if for some crazy reason it doesn't, just burn the whole thing down. The system hit an error it never expected, and this one line of code told it to panic and crash instead of, handling it gracefully. A single programming choice with global consequences. Okay, so once the team finally figured out the real cause, the game changed. It went from a detective story to a high-pressure race against the clock to fix it. But bringing the internet back wasn't as simple as just flipping a switch. This timeline really shows you how intense it was. It took them more than 2 hours just to find the root cause, thanks to all those red herrings. Once they knew what was wrong, it took almost another hour to stop the bad file from spreading. And while they got most traffic flowing again by 2:30, it took until after 5 p.m., nearly 6 hours from the start, for everything to get back to 100% normal. So why did it take so long? Well, in a really candid comment online, Cloudflare CEO Matthew Prince just laid it all out. First, they lost a ton of time chasing the ghost of a cyber attack. Second, their system wasn't built to let them just manually plug in a good file to fix things. And finally, the sheer scale of the fix was insane. They had to force reboot processes on a massive number of servers all around the world. So the internet is back on, the dust has settled. What do we learn from all this? This whole event became a powerful, real-world lesson in just how complex and, frankly, how fragile our digital world can be. The first lesson? Accountability. The company was incredibly transparent, publishing a super detailed report on what happened in less than 24 hours. And the CEO's direct apology wasn't just corporate speak. It acknowledged the huge impact and set a tone of responsibility, which is absolutely vital for rebuilding trust. So if you boil it all down, the big takeaways are pretty clear. 1. Hyper-complex systems fail in complex, unexpected ways. 2. A single line of code can literally affect the entire planet. 3. Being radically transparent when you mess up is the best and only way to handle a crisis. And maybe the biggest lesson of all, so much of the internet we use every day relies on a very, very small number of companies. And this quote from a media analysis really gets to the heart of it. This wasn't just a technical glitch for one company. This was a stress test for the entire global internet. And it revealed some pretty worrying cracks in the foundation. Which really leaves us with this final heavy question. We've built this incredible, interconnected world, but a huge portion of it rests on the shoulders of just a handful of giant companies. And as that centralization gets more and more intense, the blast radius from a single bug, a single human error, or a single line of code just gets bigger and bigger. The 2025 Cloudflare outage gave us all a terrifying glimpse of that price. The real question is, are we prepared to pay it?